for everybody. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the FPL Command Center. When Hurricane Dorian posed a threat here to Florida, many of our employees were working here at this command center around the clock to prepare and respond to our impacted customers. And while fortunately Florida didn't get a direct hit from Dorian, we couldn't help but be impacted by the heartbreaking images that we've all seen from the devastation from just 100 miles off of our coast. Many of us at FPL and our customers, of course, have strong ties to the Bahamas. So this storm, is truly hitting close to home. Right after the storm, we had a lot of employees that came to us and said, what can we do as employees to help? And what can we do to help our neighbors in the Bahamas? Look, at FPL, that's part of the culture. It's about giving back. And we did that when Hurricane Maria pounded Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands just 2 years ago. We went there and provided humanitarian assistance as well as helped get the lights back on for that island. We, in Florida, unfortunately, have experienced a lot of storms. So when our neighbors experience nature's destruction, Floridians step up to help. That's one of the things that I think makes this state great, is that we all step up and we all help each other get back on our feet. It's the right thing to do. It's a core value at FPL, but it's also a value that is shared by other Floridians. Here in the state, we have absolutely terrific leadership at the state and at the local level. We appreciate the leadership that Governor DeSantis showed as Dorian approached. He took a very hands-on approach to this from day one. He quickly declared a state of emergency. He brought his emergency response team together. He went out and visited the emergency operations centers across the state. He came here to the FPL Command Center, all in an effort to make sure that we were all ready to go and ready to help Floridians get back up on their feet should this devastating storm hit us. Fortunately, it didn't, but I will tell you that having the governor's calm leadership helped Florida prepare for the threat of this extremely dangerous storm. So I'm proud to stand with him, with the Lieutenant Governor, with the First Lady, with his entire emergency leadership team here today for this announcement. And Governor, I'd welcome you to come up to the podium. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, good morning, and thank you for that introduction. Obviously, we were on edge here in Florida for days and days, not knowing what path Dorian would take. As we saw it turn and be at least relatively comfortably off our coast and kind of go north, we knew that there may be some issues that we had to tend to in Florida, and we are, but we saw the destruction that had happened in the Bahamas. And so I said at the outset that we were going to be working in Florida to be able to help in a variety of different ways, one of which was to identify some resources that we had available in case Dorian hit our shores to be able to provide some of those resources to the Bahamas. Another avenue was to harness the generosity of individuals and private businesses here to assist with recovery efforts. And then finally, to fulfill any federal requests that are made, such as with our National Guard. And when I announced, thanks to Jared's leadership, that we had identified 10 of these trucks filled with water that we would be able to send to the Bahamas. This is water that we had stockpiled for a storm. It will expire once hurricane season ends. We're not out of the woods with hurricane season. Obviously, we're still monitoring, but we felt comfortable that we could give some of the water given the acute needs in the Bahamas and then still be in a position to backfill if we're unfortunate enough to get hit with the storm. And so I thank Jared for identifying that very quickly. As soon as we announced that that was going to happen, Eric Szilagyi called us and said, hey, I got a lot of water I'd like to give too. So you have 10 of these trucks are going to be filled with water from Jared at Department of Emergency Management, and then 9 additional ones from Florida Power and Light. And so I really want to thank FPL, I want to thank Eric for doing this. So this is a huge amount of water. It's going to be shipped to Nassau, which is where the government is staging most of their relief efforts. And so this will be turned over to, I believe, the Ministry of Defense there to be able to do it. So this is good. Another thing that we've done is, as Dorian was potentially going to hit Florida, we had a number of companies let us know that, hey, we're going to pledge money for the people of Florida in case this thing, when this thing hits. Because we thought it was like a 90% probability at one time, I think, that it was going to hit Florida. And so they made pledges. And so as we became free from the storm, we've asked a number of them to consider getting involved with relief for the Bahamas, and a number of them are. So just from in the last 4 or 5 days since we knew that the storm was gone and we were able to tend to our needs, we've had over $3 million in pledge, donations, supplies, or services from a number of individuals and businesses throughout the state of Florida. And to put that in perspective, USAID is leading the effort for the federal government. They've done a total of about $2.8 million in humanitarian assistance for them, and they're the leader in the mission. So we're one state, and just in our coordinated efforts, you have Delta Airlines donating over $1 million, Tropical Shipping, all these cruise lines have done a great job. Tico Electric. The Grand Bahama Island, which obviously got whacked because the storm was going for a day and a half there, suffered significant damage. Not as bad as Abacos, but still significant. Tico's company is involved with that. So they're sending 250 linemen or somewhere equivalent personnel and supplies to help with power restoration. We've got 50,000 cans of water from Florida Beverage Association. All the major phone cellular services have effectively waived the fees associated with texting and calling during the whole period, I think, from the time the storm was closed until maybe just yesterday. And that's worth probably hundreds of thousands of dollars. Publix has done, between what they're doing corporately and what their customers have done, they're well over $1 million. Speaker Jose Oliva is giving, on behalf of the Republican House members, $100,000 to the relief efforts. We have Anheuser-Busch donating water that's at least worth $20,000 via President Galvano. Representative Fine has collected over 100,000 pounds of supplies that they're sending from Melbourne to the Bahamas. And so there's been a lot, over $3 million just from what we've been coordinating, but then there's been people that have just stepped up on their own. And so the total amount that's either been given or pledged right now in Florida to Bahama Relief is over $11 million. And so that's really shows you how Floridians respond to things. And yes, part of it is we do have a good relationship with the Bahamas, but part of it is that I think that's just how people are, and they want to be able to help. Now, as we knew this was going to be an issue, and as we saw Dorian turn away from our shores, I asked a friend of mine, John Rood, who was the U.S. ambassador to the Bahamas during the Bush 43 administration, to give us a sense of, okay, what more can we be doing? John knows all the people over in the Bahamas. He knows the Prime Minister. He's got a home over in some of the islands that really got whacked right outside, I guess just north of kind of Marsh Harbor in that area. And so this has been a really big part of his life. And so John has already been there and back and has issued some reports. He's going to have some comments about what we can do now going forward. We do anticipate that there's more support in the offing from some of the companies that we've been having discussions with. And so we very much appreciate that, and we're looking to be able to help in those ways that are going to be effective. So I'm going to bring up Ambassador Rood to say a few words about kind of what he sees as the issues and what we can do more going forward. John?
Thank you. Yep. Thank you, Governor, and thank you for your leadership. Soon after the storm turned north, the governor called me and said, I need somebody that's familiar with the Bahamas that can go over, assess the situation, be my eyes, but more importantly, give me ideas on what we can do together in the private sector to address some of the areas that may not be currently addressed. So I went over there, spent 3 days in the Bahamas, and the first thing I wanted to mention was what I just couldn't believe was this incredible outpouring of Floridians that were traveling to the Bahamas, whether it's helicopter, by early days, not as many boats, but soon boats and also planes that were bringing in supplies and were shuffling people back and forth. And when the governor shares the numbers on our support, we could never calculate the value of those early first responders, let's call them, that arrived and bringing the goods and, embracing, their friends from the Bahamas and just that love for a country that's a close neighbor of ours. Seeing that, I just, it really meant a lot to the Bahamians, knowing that people cared. And I just think we always should remember and thank the individuals and the corporations in those first few days that just gave so much, because it made a huge difference. So one of the things that I saw was this kinship and this relationship. And when I came back and talked to the governor, I said, we need to build on that kinship and go take it to the next step. And the next step that we've identified is providing transitional housing. There are people in these islands, in the settlements, that don't want to leave and go to Nassau. I met a friend of mine. I said, so where are you going? He said, I'm going nowhere. I'm staying here because I want to help rebuild my community. So we're working with an organization, and we said we're going to have a couple of things we're going to keep in mind. Only work with somebody that's got boots on the ground, knows what they're doing, somebody that's had experience and a proven track record. So we've identified an organization called Mission of Hope International, and we've committed funds for them to build transitional housing, 1,000 units of transitional housing in Marsh Harbor. This is the first step to give people that want to stay an opportunity to stay. Now, I also want to mention this organization is working closely with MEMA because we don't want to be going off in a direction that's not consistent with what the Bahamas, with their plan. So we're working together with NEMA, or they're working with NEMA. We've agreed to the funding, and the supplies can go out as early as next week once all the details are done. But to us, and I should mention, Speaker Oliva, myself, and the governor, we're going to work to raise these funds for this project. They're all going to be private funds from individuals and corporations in Florida that at this point, want to donate resources to people that are experienced in this next phase. So we're excited about this project. I'm thankful that the governor took this initiative, and it's just the first step. Give them transitional housing, they can start the cleanup, and then they can start rebuilding so we can return these settlements to the condition that they were in before the storm. Thank you.
Governor, thank you. First Lady, Lieutenant Governor, thank you. Ambassador, thank you for being here today. I want to thank FPL, obviously, for what they've done with donating all this water. As the governor and I were sitting in the EOC, literally staring at Dorian for over 30 hours and watching it spin over the Bahamas, at 185 mile an hour sustained winds, 220 mile an hour gusts, we already were talking about, if this thing misses us, how we have to start helping the Bahamas even before the pictures started coming out, because we knew right away that this could have been us, and let's be clear, it was almost us. Whatever the building code is in the state of Florida, and we have the best building code in the country, it was not built for Hurricane Dorian. And so, that's something that hit home for me. I know it hit home for the governor. When that prediction was coming in that, the strongest Category 5 storm, the strongest storm on record that was coming from this area of the Atlantic, threatening the most populous area in the state of Florida, somehow it was going to sit there for the required amount of time, and this trough was just going to come in at the right amount of time and pull it out. Some people can only explain it as just some sort of miracle, because that's literally what it was for the state of Florida. But unfortunately, that miracle for us came at the expense of our Bahamian brothers and sisters. And so, as you heard from the governor, we've been working, at all different levels over the last couple of days on trying to find donations. Obviously, clean drinking water is the first step. This is over 500,000 bottles of water. As far as I know, Governor, this is the largest charitable donation the Division of Emergency Management has ever been involved in. And I don't believe this is the last thing that we're going to help do. I have people in the EOC in Palm Beach County. I got people at the Port of Palm Beach. I have people at the Coast Guard. We are intimately involved helping to figure out what are the unmet needs and where we can help. And so, you know, we remain committed. I want to thank all the volunteer organizations out there across the state. I want to thank local elected officials, state officials. I want to thank people. I mean, you saw that story of that 6-year-old kid who'd been saving all of his money to go to Disney World. And instead of going to Disney World, he spent all of his money and did a drive of donations for the Bahamas. And if a 6-year-old can be an example for all of us, it really speaks volumes of who we are as Floridians. And I want to thank Disney World, obviously, for stepping up and sending him to Disney World. And so, Governor, we remain committed. My division remains committed, you know, and we'll do everything necessary to help our friends recover. And I want to introduce Director Lawson.
Good morning. My name is Ken Lawson. I'm the head of the Department of Economic Opportunity. And our job is during crises, bring business and government together to make sure we help our fellow neighbors and friends. And I want to thank Governor DeSantis, not only for his leadership, but for his heart. Because from his heart, he's reaching out to our neighbors in the Bahamas, making sure we're helping. And our friends at Florida Power and Light, we really thank you for every single thing you're doing. This water you're seeing to the Bahamas, it matters. It's going to help people recover. And anytime we have a crisis, any hurricane that comes, Florida Power and Light's there. Not only to turn the lights on, but keep hope alive and open in those who are suffering. So on behalf of my agency, thank you, Florida Power and Light, for everything you're doing. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Ken. And yeah, let me just thank Florida Power and Light for what they did during the run-up to Dorian here in Florida. I mean, we, as you know, many of you know, when this thing first became the beast that it was, it was outside of Puerto Rico with basically just doing a beeline to the state of Florida. And at that point, the cone of uncertainty essentially covered the entire state. I mean, it could go south to Miami, it could have gone north to Jacksonville, it could have gone across the state and ended up in the Gulf. So there was all kind of scenarios. And so FPL, I think you surged, how many total? Like 17,000 folks were ready to go. Obviously, they had to kind of wait because the storm took so long to be able to go where it needed to go. But that was really great preparation. And I think that had not, that's not always the case anytime there's a storm in any part of the country. And so I think Florida has really led the way with that. But I think, there's no substitute for having the utilities really make this a priority. And they did that. Fortunately, they weren't needed to the extent that we feared. But nevertheless, the fact that they were there really meant a lot to us. So Ambassador Rood said, kind of our next project, we're going to go forward with working to build some of this housing. I'm in contact with the administration in Washington pretty much on a daily basis. And I've said, look, what do you need from us? What can we do? Do you need a National Guard? And they've said no. They said that they've got kind of a handle on how things are going. And basically, I've been urged to pursue the course we're doing, where we're supplementing those federal efforts with the generosity of people throughout the state of Florida. And so this is just the beginning. We're going to do more, but I think it's really significant that if you take not just what we've coordinated, but all of what Florida's done, that's several times what USAID has done up to this point. I think that says a lot about our state. Happy to take a couple questions before we leave. So I talked to the White House about, because I know there's an issue with the visas or whatever. So what they have done is they have put more manpower into the visa office that processes these. They have not seen an increase in the requests, but they are sensitive to that and they're standing by and doing it. I think that the folks who've come, with a passport or with the visa, they typically know somebody here, they have a place to go and everything. And so, that's no harm for us. And obviously, if they're following whatever the administration's policy is, that's good. If you're somebody that needs assistance, like you don't have a place to stay, there's right now in Florida, there's no shelters open or anything like that. There is a lot of push for that in the Bahamas. And I think the Bahamian government would probably, in those circumstances, prefer that folks, use some of the resources that are there. We're sending all this stuff over there. There's other stuff that other people are sending over there. So the people that don't have family or friends in other parts of either Florida or wherever, they're probably going to find more relief there. But in terms of the visas, I did speak to the White House, and they said that they have put more people in charge of doing that.
Florida will need emergency funding for the Bahamas. How far coming through?
Well, so far, I don't think we have. I think that, people have come. You've had a plane flight here. I know there was one boat that brought a lot of people. Most of those folks had family members here, and so they had a plan and was to go. So there wasn't a lot of tax on resources. The administration, I think, and the Bahamian government's policy is to not facilitate any special migration. And I think that's probably the smart policy, because I think, which as Ambassador Rood said, I mean, if folks are encouraged and they have the ability to get on their feet there, they're going to be the key people that bring the country back. So that said, to the extent the federal government decides, if they do decide to facilitate more migration, obviously I think the federal government should be responsible for those costs. I mean, if it falls on a county, I think the federal government should reimburse it. So I know, you've seen members of Congress, Senate going out there saying, well, I would just urge them, identify some resources that would be used if that ends up happening. We have identified resources at the state level that we're donating, and we've identified a lot of private resources, but I think that would be something that would make sense for them to do. Well, we're willing to help. Yeah, we're willing to help work with the federal government if it does come to that. But I think we're not in that situation yet, because I think that nobody has any shelters open. I think Jared has checked this morning, and so the thought has been, if someone has a passport, they have family or friends here, they fly in, they know where they're going, and so it's not going to end up being a burden on the counties. And I think that obviously is important, because these counties spent a lot of money in the lead up to Dorian to try to protect their own folks. Now we're working with the administration to get them reimbursed for that. But that is still, I mean, Jared and I are going to have to fight for that. I mean, that is not a guarantee. Obviously, if we would have been hit by the storm, there would have been no question that we would have been being reimbursed. I still think we can get the 75% reimbursement, but it is going to take some elbow grease from us. So, but we're sensitive to the counties and what they've had to do leading up to Dorian. That has been a financial tax on them. It's a tax on the state too. I mean, we prepared a lot for this and spent money, because look, I wanted to be prepared, even though we knew it could potentially shift. We didn't want to be caught flat-footed. We want to do, and so Jared did that. I mean, he executed the plan and did it very well. So, but I think the federal government, they obviously need to step up. Now, they are doing a lot in the Bahamas. The Coast Guard took me around. The Coast Guard, they've saved a couple hundred people for sure already. Of course, the State Department is leading the mission, but the Department of Defense, the U.S. Northern Command, has a number of assets in the Bahamas. We have 20 rotary wing aircraft. We have UH-60s, we have CH-53s, and we have MV-22 Ospreys. And so those are able to assist search and rescue. They can also assist with evacuations, because as you know, most of the Bahamas did not get hit by this. The Bahamas have many different islands, and so they are evacuating people to other parts of the Bahamas as well, which is safe and where there's supplies. So we have a big DoD footprint there as well. So I think the federal government's been very engaged in this. I think they're working hard with it. But clearly, any costs on Florida, we would ask that they step up to the plate on that. So the law allows you to have a plan. I mean, I think the problem that we had with the Broward situation in Irma was they didn't have a plan. And there was a hospital right across the street, but I think they called, left a voicemail somewhere. And so what we've told people is, obviously if you have a generator, you're in compliance, that's functioning. If you have a plan where one would be delivered, you're in compliance. But if you have a bona fide, legit evacuation plan, sometimes that's the best course of action. It just depends on what you're doing. Basically, ACA checked all the coastal counties from Palm Beach up that were in the eye of the storm, and had verification that either they had the generator was on its way, or they were planning on evacuating. Having a bona fide evacuation plan is a way to keep people safe. What's not an evacuation plan is to say, well, I'm going to call 911 in the middle of a storm. That does not work. That puts the people you're charged with protecting at risk. So we felt that we were ready for the storm. A lot of it is because of prodding, and it wasn't just the state. You had a number of counties that were sending people into the assisted living facilities, seeing whether they were in compliance, and if not, dinging them for that. I know Orange County had a lot of people doing it. I think you may have seen it in Palm Beach. So I think that it ended up being where those folks were protected. At the same time, they're going back at the state agencies and looking on the back end to see were there any problems with what happened. And so the bottom line is this, that law did, whatever you think about it. I personally think that if you're in charge of these people, you should move hell and earth to protect them, because that's your job. Nevertheless, if you need a law to tell them to do it, fine. But the bottom line is, I think we're in much better shape today than we were during Hurricane Irma with respect to our assisted living facilities. But that took a lot of hard work. Obviously, the legislature weighed in, but a lot of people in the executive branch and in my agencies worked hard, and a lot of local officials worked hard. So it's a big sensitivity, and it'll obviously be something we'll do going forward. Thanks, guys. We'll have more news for you on this stuff very soon.